Welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show and definitely another exciting guest. Today's show is one that definitely is a clear indication of that beast mindset. Let me go a little bit deeper here. Imagine being assaulted, sexually assaulted. And usually when these things happen, depending on the situation, you have to prove that it really happened. And a lot of times that can be difficult. Let's use an example. You go out on a date and something goes wrong. Too many drinks, something happens. No means no, but at the end of the day, somebody decided that they wanted to go beyond the boundaries. And now you're caught between the rock and a hard place. Like, who do you tell? You go to law enforcement and it's almost played like two consenting adults. Your word against his, or let's flip the script. His word against yours, because men have the same thing that happened to them too. So today on the show, we're going to talk with a beautiful young lady, and we're going to understand what she went through that led to a beautiful book, More Than a Survivor, The 8 Keys to Overcoming. She's on the show today, and it's Amy McKiernan. But they call her Amy Mac because she's Irish. What's up, baby girl?
Hi, how are you? I married Irish. I'm more Italian, but that's okay.
Now that's even more crazy.
Yeah.
I know it's all kind of drama in that household.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Amy, thank you for sending me the book. I like I said today, I read it, didn't finish it, but I'm going to finish it. But I was really shocked about what I read. But before we get into this book in the 8 keys, and we're not going to give everybody the whole 8 keys because I want you to get the book. But before we go down that route, you're Irish, not Irish, you're Italian. Your husband's Irish. Tell me a little bit about who you are first.
Yeah. So I grew up with a really big family. I lived with my mom and dad. I had youngest of 3 kids, lived next door to grandma. Grandma's house was the spot for Sunday dinners every week, spaghetti and meatballs, garlic bread, best you ever had. And, really big family oriented household, laughing, very loud. The good kind of chaos. And so I had a great childhood. I was a creative kid. I loved to perform, always dressing up, always creating things, and just putting on shows. And, so it was a stable situation. It was a stable childhood. And once I hit my adolescence and then teenagehood, that's when things took a turn. And I had some very, very challenging experiences. And I won't go into all of them, but there are several.
What do you mean? I didn't mean to cut you off. What do you mean, like, during that time period, things start to change? Did you mean your overall appearance, your body structure, your femininity? What part changed, and what kind of without going too deep, what kind of situations were happening to you, and roughly about what age brackets were these transformations? And the reason that I'm asking is because not only do we showcase that beast mindset, but we also educate people, because we let people know this is something you need to watch out for in your household that could be taking place and stuff. So what?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, great questions. I started experiencing a shift internally when I had experiences of sexual abuse. My first experience, and again, I won't go into too much detail, but I had an experience with a teacher when I was about 12 or 13. And that was my first experience with a trusted adult that felt very confusing to me. And after that experience, there started being this shift in my identity. I couldn't, it's like I lost this piece of myself and I was grappling with who am I really? Because this thing happened to me and it made me feel differently about myself. And it was quiet, though. It was a quiet happening inside me. And it wasn't until I was 15 and I was a freshman in high school and I experienced my first rape. And that was by a friend. And there was alcohol involved. And that's when I became a shell of who I once was. It was like a light went out inside of me. So that kid that I described earlier, that kid who was vibrant and always performing, and I had been doing theater classes before this, I was in a play, like that kid went away. Then it became, yeah, go ahead.
Not to cut you off, let me ask a couple questions while we're on different segments here. Let's go back a little bit to the teaching. I used to be a school teacher, so I'm going to go from both sides of the story. When you're a young girl and you're in school, a lot of times little girls can be captivated by the teacher. There's a two-part question. Were you captivated by the teacher at that age? Then the second part of the question is, were you being, now that you look at it from a different standpoint, were there signs of you being groomed?
Great questions. The first question, no, I was not captivated by this teacher at all. Two, yes. I think looking back, it's very clear that there was grooming happening because it was like this slow progression of, it seemed like he was testing the waters, right? And the fact that I didn't say anything the first time, then it led to another time. And I didn't say anything the other time. And then it was just something where, him touching me left me feeling like I must be confused or I must be mistaking this for something it's not. And just kind of letting it go. And then realizing that the more it kept happening, I was like, this isn't right. Like this is.
How was he performing these activities without saying what he was doing? Like you had to remember the first time that it took place. Like literally what goes through your mind at 12 years old? This is somebody you post. And how did he even perceive to do it? And was it like repetitive, like for a month, 2 months, a whole school cycle?
Yeah. So the first time it happened, I was in the hallway. It was in the middle of the bell rang. Kids were moving classes. Like it was in the hallway. It was in like broad daylight, if you will, but like nobody was paying attention. And we were standing outside the classroom and I was talking to him. And as you can see, I use my hands a lot. And I was, as 12 or 13-year-olds do, I was very, theatrical about whatever was going on. And he was like, it's okay. Calm down. It's okay. And he just placed his hand directly on my breast. And it was like, I froze. Like, this is clearly a mistake. Like, whoops, right? Like, you did not mean to do that. But instead of moving his hand away or being like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, he just kept it there. And he looked directly in my eyes. And I remember it so vividly, just being like, what is happening right now? And then eventually he moved it to my shoulder. And then he just kept on talking as if nothing happened. And it was so bizarre to me in the moment. And it made me feel like clearly this had to be a mistake. Like he must not have realized what he did. But it wasn't until I found that, it just kept happening. Like certain moments in the hallway where he would bump into me in a certain way and his hands would be on my chest again. And it happened a few times until I finally told my parents. because it was becoming clearer and clearer to me that this was not a mistake. This just kept happening, and it was intentional, and something was going on here. And I honestly couldn't tell you how long. It was closer to the end of the school year. I couldn't tell you how long it was going on. Um, but I do, I can tell you that my parents intervened immediately, and this was a while ago. And he got fired. Again, it was the end of the school year, though. And that was kind of it. That was like the end of that whole situation.
Were there other individuals that you later find out that this has happened, that this was something that has been done before while you was at that age?
Yeah. So I remember, it got around a little bit at the school, not too much, but I remember being in the hallway afterward, and after it all like came out and everything, and this girl came up to me and hugged me, and she was very emotional, and she thanked me because he was, in her words, always making her uncomfortable. That's all she said. And I remember feeling like even more confused. Like, it didn't make me feel better. Clearly I helped her in a way, but it was even more confusing, I think, at that age, being like, this is probably happening to other girls.
I'm gonna go here with this and go deeper. I remember my senior year. I won't mention any names. There was a girl in my classroom my senior year at school. Or was it my junior year? One of the years, I think it was my junior year. Pretty girl, never will forget it. And next thing you know, the coach is being fired for having intercourse or relationship with her. I know there was other girls, even in my community, in my neighborhood. And the backlash that girl got was just like, wow. I mean, she had to leave the school. I don't even think she was in school, which was kind of funny when I look at it, because I'm like, how long did this relationship go on? Because she was new in the classroom, but anyway, long story short, those women were young ladies, were basically backlashed by their peers. What kind of, when it came out and you're 12 years old, how were you being treated with other people in your school besides the one that hugged you?
I mean, it didn't spread to the point where I felt like a lot of other people knew. I don't remember. That's a great question, and that's actually more relatable to some of my other experiences. With that one, I don't remember feeling like super, like everybody around me knew. I remember having that one experience with that girl. A couple other people knew, but it doesn't stick out in my memory as to like how that felt for me, because I very quickly like pushed it down, brushed it off, and I literally moved on as if nothing happened. I was just very much like this. I'm not like, we're just gonna pretend this one didn't happen. But when it comes to my experience when I was a freshman in high school, that experience went around the entire school, and there was so much backlash. Like, you say that, and I feel for those girls that you're talking about, because I know how that feels. It was like the entire school knew about that other experience, and it was divided. Either
I get it, because I even asked the coach, I'm like, hey man, like, did this happen? That was the first thing out of my mouth. And people have to realize, even at 17 or 18, when you graduate, your mind isn't equipped for this kind of thing. Now, I remember also this girl at summer school that came from another school to our school, and I hate to say it, but it's they gang banged her.
Oh,
it smelled so bad it was behind the bleachers, and it smelled so bad what had happened was, they said that this was what was said, that she was with one person and that other people found out and they wouldn't let her go. And I remember them taking her out, and I'm thinking to myself, this can't be happening, and stuff, because I wasn't experiencing that feel, but you do know right from wrong. So when you got to high school, you mentioned, if I'm following the story right, the person that did this to you was a friend and alcohol was involved. And you were
Correct.
still in high school, right?
Yes, I was a freshman. I was 15.
That's pretty much what happened to that girl. But when it happened to you, this is a two-part question. First of all, let's go back a minute. You're daddy's little girl and you're an Italian. Not a good recipe for your father, knowing what happened. Now he's probably truly overprotective, but how is the household now with your mother and your father, knowing the bond that you have, and how are you being received with your circle, your inner structure? Where is there emotional support? Where they're just like, you will get over it? How were you being treated in that environment?
That's a great question. And I will say that I was very fortunate in that sense. My family was very supportive. And now with going back with the situation with the teacher, I mean, I told them, but I didn't give them much. And so they did their best. My father actually requested to speak to the teacher in person. Um, be, because he was like, I want to look this man in the eyes. And they let him.
Oh,
um, but my father, he's one of a kind. He's a minister. He is the most centered person
right.
I think you will ever meet. He just always focuses on doing the next right thing. And I've learned so much from him. Like, he's literally the rock of the house. And so, my family was very supportive through that. And then going into high school, when the other experience happened, I didn't tell them. Once again, I didn't tell them, but they did find out, and they were very supportive. And the problem is that I was so shut down, and at no fault of theirs, I felt like such a burden. And I think that's what happens. Even for those who have those support systems, they feel like such a burden that they almost like shut them out. It's like they
You
don't accept the support.
Did you not tell them because a particular incident happened? And usually when that happens, I think it makes people to think, what are you doing to keep putting yourself in this situation?
Mm.
Whether you be
Yeah, I mean,
family or friend, you know what I mean? So was
right.
there a fear factor for you going, oh my God, not again, not again?
Well, I had lied to them about where I was that night, and I was drinking.
Oh,
And
oh,
so I was like, there was that self blame, right? Like, I was drinking, I lied. They had no idea where I really was. This was before I had cell phones. Cell phones were not a huge thing yet. And so, there was that fear of getting in trouble for lying and drinking and all those things. And then there was just like the self blame that comes naturally, I think, when you get assaulted, is like, somehow this is my fault.
how long
And
did
I
you
had
know the guy? How long did you know him?
I had known him all year. This happened in March that year, actually 4 days after I turned 15. And I had known him. He was part of my group of friends. Me and my best friend had this group of guy friends who were all older than us that we hung out with all the time. And so I had hung out with him plenty of times before. And we were all just hanging out at a friend's house, drinking. And I was not an experienced drinker, and I drank way too much. I remember he was watching me, and he was making sure I had a full glass that entire night, until my memory goes in and out, and that's when he raped me.
You didn't tell your parents, but there
Right.
were other people at this event. I
Mhm.
assume they sat back and watched this take place. Was it more than one person? Because usually when you're that age and you're drinking, you bring in your buddies and all
Mhm.
this. I mean, did it get to, not being graphic, did it get to that point?
So there were other people there. From what I remember, I only remember him. Now, I will say that to this day, I don't remember everything. And so that still haunts me a little bit because I'm not actually sure what else could have happened.
Right.
But I remember him. And we were in one of the bedrooms, the door was shut, and it didn't stop until my best friend and her boyfriend walked in on it. And that's when it stopped. And the only thing I remember after that is my best friend's boyfriend sitting on the floor next to me for like the rest of the night as I puked everywhere. I was sobbing. I was like rolling around just sobbing.
Did
I
you go
remember
to the
that.
doctor to see if
No, nobody called 911. Nobody, I mean, again, and this is why education is so important because we were all kids, right? We're all these teenagers. I don't think anyone knew what to do. Nobody called 911. We didn't talk about it amongst
what if you got
ourselves.
pregnant or why not with a disease?
Well, I did end up going to the hospital after my parents found out. So that night I didn't go. I went home the next day. My sister picked me up from my friend's house where I was supposed to be the night before. So the guys dropped us off to her house because that's where I said I was staying. My sister picked me up and she knew immediately that something was wrong. I told her what happened. She was beside herself, and I had her promise me that she wouldn't tell anyone because I couldn't even, I was so shut down. I was in shock. I just couldn't process it.
Hold on, Amy. Who took you back to the house that you were supposed to be at? The people that assaulted you?
No, my friend's boyfriend drove us the next morning. The
So
guy
what
who
did they do about the dude? Not to cut you off. I'm
Yeah.
trying to focus all this.
Yeah.
Your friend's boyfriend is holding you on the floor as you throw everything up and trying to process. Where was the dude? Did anybody approach the dude or the people who done the actual act?
I have no idea. All I know is the next day he wasn't there. I don't know. And here's the thing. I never asked. I didn't even think about this night like that in that way until I was an adult. I don't know. I have no idea if anybody said anything to him. I don't know where he went. All I know is he wasn't there the next morning. The boyfriend brought us back to the house. And I never talked to anyone, not the boyfriend, especially the one that took care of me. I never even talked to him about it afterward directly. I never asked him questions.
But you're still in school. So
yeah.
people at school knew what happened.
Mm-hmm.
What was that
And
like?
I still never, it was terrible. So I go to school Monday. This happened Friday night. I went to school Monday. And I was just like, I'm just going to pretend like this didn't happen. And I'm walking through the hallway and I see him with a group of guys, the guy who did it. And him and his friends are laughing and smiling and he looks right at me. And I look away and I hear one of the friends say to him, "It's okay, they never look at you after." And so it became clear that he was bragging. There was a rumor going around that he had sex with me and he was bragging about it. And so I kept my head down. I was very quiet. And next thing I know, this girl who was also a part of the friend group, but her and I were not friends. Like she didn't really like me. I was a little intimidated by her. She was older than me. She called me over to talk to her during like lunch. And I remember being like, she's going to beat me up. Like she's mad at me. I don't know why I thought that, but that's what I thought. I went up to her and she looks at me and she goes, "What did he do to you?" And again, I hadn't told, like my sister knew, she wasn't spreading rumors. Like, so looking back, she was 17.
So it was a 2-year age difference.
Yes. And she was at the same school.
Okay.
And so looking back now, I realized that there were the two versions of the story were already circulating the school, but I never really thought about that part in the moment.
What were the two versions again?
One version was that he had sex with me, yay him, and the other version was that he raped me. And so she asked me what he did to me. I explained it to her the best I could, and she hugged me. And she said, "I want you to stay away from him." And so it was just like this odd, like these things, people are knowing about this. I'm not saying anything, but people are knowing about this.
Mm-hmm.
And then she called my brother, who was in college, a freshman in college, and he was actually on his way home because he was sick.
The girl
And
who told you, what did he do
Yeah.
to you, knew your brother?
Yes.
But you were scared of her? And she knew your brother?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she just didn't, we just weren't friends. So she knew my brother. They weren't like good friends, but she knew him. She was older and he was already in college. And she called him and told him what happened. And he called my father. And then by the time I got off the bus that day, my family knew, and my dad was waiting for me. And he hugged me and he walked me to the house. And we all sat down together to figure it out.
What a great family. And
yeah.
You know, how did that make you feel at that moment?
I mean, in that moment, I felt shameful, like a burden. And it's so interesting because I was so surrounded by love.
Right.
But all I could feel was darkness.
How did you pursue to get out of it with the help of your dad? I know your dad went up there and just like, the Italian came out of him.
I mean, he there's this one moment that I talk about in my book when we're sitting around that kitchen table.
Yeah.
And we're talking, and my brother gets a phone call, and he picks it up, and it's somebody on the other line who says to him, "I heard you have a problem that needs to be taken care of." And I didn't hear this. My dad did. I was just like sitting there. And my brother looks at my dad, and my dad has this moment, he has a moment of like, do I just pretend I didn't hear that? Mm-hmm. Or do I focus on channeling this anger in a appropriate way for my daughter?
Right.
And so he tells my brother, he says, "Tim, call off the dogs." And he said, "No, we're good." And he hung up. And, so my dad made a choice in that moment. And in my book, my dad actually has moments of where I pause and he writes his perspective to share the two, because I couldn't see any of his perspective in those moments.
Give us one of the perspective without giving all of it away from your dad's standpoint, because I want to get two parts to this. I want to get the part from your dad. I want to get the part from your mom. And more importantly, how is this really affecting your mom? Because Italian women are a different breed of women.
So, and I will say we're not 100% Italian. So there's a mix here, but there is a piece of like my maiden name is Sriracha. So, there's a piece of Italian there, but it's not 100%. But I mean, I know they told me about the moment that my dad called her at work and said that I'm coming to pick you up right now. Something happened. And she refused to get off the phone with him until he told her what. And he told her, and you could hear the echoes of her scream just throughout the hallways of the bank that she worked, because she was so devastated. And my mom is one of the most nurturing, loving people you will ever meet. And she just, I mean, I was her youngest daughter, like the brokenness that you could see in my family's faces. But I felt like it was my fault. And it's not because they were telling me it was my fault, but that's just how I internalized it. I had so much blame because I wasn't where I was supposed to be. I was drinking. And so in my mind, this was my fault. And look at the pain I'm causing my family. And in their mind, my daughter just got hurt in the most unimaginable way. How can we help her through this? And again, like going back to that moment around the kitchen table, one of the perspectives my dad shares is that moment, in that moment of centering himself to be like, okay, this is where the focus comes in. I now know who I need to be for my family. I need to be the leader, and I need to do this in the right way, and in the least harmful way to my daughter. I need to be a calm support. And that's exactly what he was.
let's go after all this unfortunate things happen. You took a lot of the burden upon yourself by being in the wrong place, the wrong time, and it happened, and it shouldn't have happened. I get the accountability that you placed upon yourself, but how do you get back to a safe environment? How do you get that beast mindset back and say, okay, I take the blame. I was here, and I'm not condoning what had happened, but at
Right.
least you're saying, if I hadn't have been there, I wasn't supposed to have been there. I didn't pick the right friends. I thought he was my friend. And it's funny because most time when these things happen, you already know the person.
Right.
Yeah. So how do you get your mental state back to get back on track and fulfill what your father is doing by protecting you, by keeping that safe mindset and not go angry at him?
Yeah, I mean that's a loaded question because it wasn't like this overnight flip of the switch.
Right.
So the journey was long and it was painful and it took a lot of time of me not being in that headspace
Mhm.
and turning to heavy drinking and experimenting with drugs, and I had other sexual assaults happen afterward. And I was so lost and stuck in this victim mindset, and just, it's like I accepted my lot in life, right? This was who I was for the world. That's how I saw myself. I was just this thing to be used and abused and discarded. And that's how I carried myself.
What do you mean that's how
And
you carried yourself? Because you said this continued. So how does
Mhm.
it continue? Did you keep
It
putting
wasn't the
yourself in,
same person.
or did you keep putting yourself in the same type of, repeated behavior patterns? And if so, what was
Well,
those
yeah,
patterns?
it was the drinking. It was the drinking. And so I would just drink um until I was either sick or blacked out. And I would surround myself with people who didn't really care about me because I didn't care about me. And I would put myself in relationships with people who didn't care about me because I didn't think I deserved real love or care. And so, yeah, the same patterns and behaviors and self destructive behaviors, and the drinking. Not probably a little over a year later, was drinking heavily again with friends, again, different friends. And I became so sick and I was raped for a second time,
By the
and
person that you knew.
by a person that I knew.
Okay.
And it just became, it was like this, you know, like this realization in that moment of like, yeah, this is just what happens to me.
So when you wake up from blacking out and you just been assaulted again from somebody that you know, how do you, I don't want to sound insensitive, but some of the questions I'm gonna ask, I just gotta ask. Like, how do you just keep going on day to day? This dude just assaulted you, and you get up and go back to doing
Yeah.
what you're doing.
I mean, and for anyone who's listening who's been there, when it becomes your identity, it's almost like you become, I'm going to use the word comfortable, but there's nothing comfortable about it, but you become accepting of who you are for the world. And it's like you just accept that you are a victim. You accept that you are damaged.
Is that
And
how
that's
the
how you live
people?
life.
Is that how the people? Let me go here. Did pretty much everybody in the neighborhood or in your surrounding know that you had this track history of drinking, passing out? Hey, go rape her, do whatever you want. She don't give a fuck. Was this the way that men were actually looking at you that came in contact with you?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know if that's how they saw me. They didn't voice that. I that's how I started to see myself because it did feel like no matter where I went, somebody was abusing me in some way. The whole school knew about it. So I'm sure, looking back now, I'm sure that the boys that I was hanging out with knew my history. And does that mean that in their brains I was an easy target? Maybe. I'm not sure. I never asked those questions. I never voiced those things. But I do think that I was viewed as a whore. I think I was viewed as an easy target, because I was just getting way too drunk and people knew I had these experiences. And I think that
They capitalize off of them.
yeah,
The predator and the prey, basically what it winds
yeah,
up in. When do
yeah.
you take control of the situation? Enough has to
So,
be enough. So let me go here.
right.
This happened continuously, multiple times. The fact that you're very young, you're not way up there in age. You have children?
I do now. Yeah.
When does the light stop? When do you say enough?
Yeah.
Because you're married, right? You're married with
Yeah.
children.
I'm married now. Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, yeah. I mean, high school was hard.
right.
And I was in therapy the whole time. And so therapy, it worked quietly in the background for me, I'll say. I wasn't always very invested, but it worked quietly in the background for me. And there were some moments in life where I was granted a reset. And sometimes it was a forced reset. Like, for instance, getting in trouble with my parents because I was lying. I became such a master manipulator. I was lying to them all the time. And remember, this is before cell phones had the trackers. Like, it was so hard for them to know what I was actually doing. And I remember I lied to them. I got caught again, and they grounded me for the rest of the school year. There was like 6 weeks left of school. And it was this forced reset. I wasn't allowed to see any of my friends. I wasn't allowed out of the house unless I was with them. And it was like this, it was so good for me because I stopped doing drugs and drinking. And I started like connecting with myself a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this was before some of the other experiences happened. So it didn't fix everything. It wasn't like I had this reset and I was amazing, but I did do some deeper healing during that time. And then life was lifing and I took some steps backwards. And that's what it's all about is it's like paving a new road, which I talk about in my book.
Mm-hmm.
It's not this overnight new path that you're on.
Right.
It's steps. It's breaking down boulders. It's getting stuck. It's backtracking. It's moving forward a little bit more. It's about making small choices, then making bigger choices for yourself. And also deciding. You have to get to a point where you decide that you want to heal. And that took me time to really decide that I wanted to not only stop drinking and doing drugs, but also heal and love myself again.
Let me go here and let me also clarify. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show and share such a beautiful story, that beast mindset and the 8 keys of overcoming sexual assault with your book, More Than a Survivor. When you get into this transformation, you mentioned therapy was a silent treatment in the background, but you wasn't fully invested. But then when you did become invested, you start to see the shift. You now have a child. You're married. How do you, let's start with the husband first, because you're not going to tell your children what happened. Let's start with your husband. How do you become transparent and let him know what you've been through? And because I'm pretty sure you still live in the same community, how do you help him mentally by knowing that you put yourself in a situation and labeled yourself in a certain category based on the other people that did it, the perpetrator? How do you get him to help you with your journey?
I mean, so I think that my situation with my husband might be different than someone who meets their husband later on in life, because my husband and I actually went to high school together. And so he remembers hearing about some of my situations in high school. We didn't really know each other until like junior, senior year. And we were friends for a while. before we started dating. And so he like knew me through some of my growth. And he knew about some of the situations, and we've just created, because we were friends first, we created this open, trusting friendship where we could be honest with each other. I mean, we used to give each other relationship advice, like we just were ourselves around each other. And I think for him, even now, one of the biggest struggles that he has, because I have my book now, I go on podcasts, I do speaking events. For him, it's hard because he still reverts back to this very protective state of like, it's hard to hear these things because I just want to go back and protect you, and he sees how powerful and strong I am now.
Yeah.
And he's just filled with pride, right? Like it's life-changing, and I'm impacting others, and I'm giving a voice of hope and healing to other people now through this. And that's who I am. I identify with the growth and the strength that have come from my experiences, not the pain, not the trauma of it, the growth and the strength and the confidence. And I have completely become whole again. And I have completely taken back my life. And that's who he sees. That's who he's with every day, and that's the version that my children get. And my son is 18, and he knows about my book, and he knows about some of my experiences. And he, I think if anything, it has been an inspiration for him and proof for him, who he's got his own struggles, that you can overcome what life throws at you. You don't have to identify as a victim. You don't have to identify as a survivor. You can identify as an overcomer, and you can take your power back, and you can overcome these hard things and these challenges. And that's just who I show up as.
Before we wrap up this, you mentioned the 8 keys to overcoming this. What was the toughest 3? I'm not going to give out all 8. I know the listeners are like, Andre, please give out a little bit more. Now you got to get the book. More than a survivor, plain and simple. What are 3 of the toughest ones? Because usually, like when you're in AA and all that, they say you got to forgive the people that did this. You got to make amends over here. You got, but what was out of the 8? Give me the 3 that was the most toughest, but the most impactful, that really carved you into who you are today.
I think that 3 of the toughest would be solidify your support system, because you, like I did, I had a support system. I had a great support system, but I didn't accept that support system until I was ready to. And I think that oftentimes people who might not, either don't have the support that I had, or you feel so alone and lost. And it's like, you need a support system to get through these things. And you have to find the support system that is healthy and works for you. And I think that can be very challenging, but I promise you it is out there. And I talk about kind of finding your tribe, but like looking at that tribe and saying, are they actually supporting my healing, or are they encouraging my numbing and my, pushing these things down? Because you can have a tribe who you love, like a friend group or whatever it is, who will help you drink your sorrows away and make sure you have a great time. But that's not the kind of support system I'm talking about. I'm talking about a support system who will sit with you in the quiet, and sit with you in the pain, and show up for you every day, or go to therapy with you, or is a part of a support group, or as just a listening ear. And I think that can be really hard, because when you feel so alone, you often shut yourself out away from getting support. And so that's one of them. I think another really hard one is called avoid the void and speak up, because for those of us who haven't told anyone, that's like one of the first things, is giving language and giving a voice to your experiences and not being so alone. And we get stuck in this void. And it's so hard to get out of it because it becomes comfortable for you. And like, even if your experiences have happened 20 plus years ago, it's still not too late to speak up and tell somebody. And that's like one of the first steps to really getting it out. It's like you get it out of your body and you put it out in the world. Like, this thing happened. And sometimes it's so freeing alone just to say it out loud or write it down or tell somebody. And then another harder one, I think, is claim your justice. And that one is all about finding justice for you, even when justice isn't served. Because a lot of times justice isn't served.
Right.
And where does that leave you?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that there is still justice for you and you get to claim it. And in that section, it does talk about forgiveness and what that means in these situations. And it talks about, it's really about reclaiming your power and finding that justice regardless of what the outside world is doing or looking like. You still get to claim it for yourself. And I think that one's really hard because it talks about, like I said, it talks about forgiveness, and that's a touchy word in these kind of scenarios. And when justice isn't served, it does feel like the battle is lost sometimes.
Wow.
But they're all three really powerful keys when you can accept them and work with them.
Wow, that is deep. Amy, congratulations on overcoming and really changing your life, keeping that beast mindset. Thank you so much for taking time to come on to the show. Who is More Than a Survivor meant for?
It's meant for anyone who has, experienced sexual abuse in their life, no matter when it happened. And it's also for people who support someone who has experienced these things. Like I said before, I give the perspectives of my dad and my sister throughout the book. And so it makes it a book that either party can read and really get a deeper understanding of each other, and work through it together. There's a reflective journal that comes with it that you get to work through as you're going through it, so that you can connect to your own journey, not only mine, too.
Amy, thank you once again for taking time to come on the show. Love to have
You're
you
so
come
welcome.
back, as your life
I'd love to come
continues
back.
to evolve, keeping that beast mindset. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you subscribe, like, share, follow, do whatever it takes. Click that button. All it takes is one click to change your life or make a difference in somebody else's. This has been another. Whoa, let me go here. Amy, how can they get this book? I'm leaving out the best part. How do we get this book?
Yeah, so you can find it on Amazon. You can go to your local bookstore and see if they have it or ask them to order it for you. You can go to Book Baby Bookshop. I'm an independent author, so that's an indie author site. Anywhere online, but if you want quick delivery, Amazon does have it. So I encourage you, if you know someone or need it yourself, to definitely check it out.
Sounds like a winner. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another, and I do mean another, exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show.